The soft jazz music of Romano's restaurant created an intimate atmosphere that Tuesday evening, with dim lighting casting warm shadows across the elegant tables. Sarah Martinez adjusted her simple black dress for the third time, checking her phone nervously. She had chosen this outfit carefully, professional yet approachable, hoping to make a good impression on her blind date, Marcus, whom her coworker had insisted was perfect for her. At 28, Sarah worked as a librarian at the downtown branch, a job she loved despite the modest salary. She lived paycheck to paycheck, but she was proud of her independence and her small apartment in Queens. Tonight represented something special, her first date in over a year, and a chance to maybe find the connection she'd been longing for. Sarah? A tall man with perfectly styled hair approached her table, his expensive suit impeccably tailored. His eyes quickly scanned her appearance, and she noticed the subtle shift in his expression, a barely concealed disappointment that made her stomach clench. "Marcus, yes, that's me." She stood, offering a warm smile despite her nervousness. "Thank you for meeting me here. This place is beautiful." He didn't return her enthusiasm. Instead, he pulled out his phone, checking it with an exaggerated urgency. "Yeah, listen, Sarah. I just got a call from work. Emergency situation. I'm going to have to cut this short." His voice carried no trace of genuine regret. Sarah's heart sank, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Oh, I understand. Work emergencies can be overwhelming. Maybe we could reschedule?" Marcus was already reaching for his wallet, his movements quick and dismissive. "Look, I'll cover your drink or whatever." He pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and placed it on the table with a gesture that felt more like charity than courtesy. This should handle it. The humiliation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at the $5 bill, understanding immediately that this wasn't about any work emergency. This was about her appearance, her clothes, her obvious lack of designer accessories. She wasn't enough for him, not pretty enough, not sophisticated enough, not wealthy enough. "Marcus, you don't have to," she began. But he was already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear in what was clearly a fake conversation. "Yeah, I'm leaving now," she heard him say to no one. Complete waste of time. Sarah sat back down slowly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. The $5 bill seemed to mock her from the white tablecloth. Around her, other couples laughed and shared intimate conversations, their happiness highlighting her mortification. She picked up the bill with trembling fingers, wondering if she should just leave immediately. The waiter, a kind elderly man with sympathetic eyes, approached her table. "Miss, can I get you anything? Perhaps some wine to start?" Sarah looked up at him, fighting back tears. "Actually, could I just have a coffee? Black coffee." She held up the $5 bill. "I'm not sure this will cover much else." The waiter's expression softened with understanding. He'd clearly witnessed the entire humiliating scene. "Of course, miss. Take your time." As Sarah sat alone, stirring her coffee mechanically, she couldn't help but replay the encounter in her mind. The dismissive look in Marcus's eyes, the way he'd barely made an effort to conceal his disappointment, the casual cruelty of leaving her with $5 as if she were a beggar. She had never felt so small, so worthless. What Sarah didn't notice was the woman at the corner table, partially hidden behind a pillar, who had observed every moment of the interaction. The woman's perfectly manicured fingers gripped her wine glass tightly, her jaw set in barely controlled anger. She had watched Marcus's performance with growing disgust, recognizing the type of man who measured a person's worth by their appearance and status symbols. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, was accustomed to reading people quickly and accurately. At 35, she had built her company from a small startup into a multinational corporation through sheer determination and an ability to see potential where others saw limitations. And right now, she saw something in the young woman sitting, alone, that made her blood boil. Not at Sarah, but at the system that allowed people like Marcus to treat others with such casual cruelty. The scene unfolding before Victoria triggered memories of her own past, of times when she had been judged and dismissed before people knew her capabilities. She watched Sarah's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation, the way she held her head high despite the obvious pain, and felt a fierce protective instinct she hadn't experienced in years. Victoria Sterling had come to Romano's for a quiet dinner alone, something she rarely allowed herself in her demanding schedule. As the CEO of Sterling Industries, every moment of her day was typically scheduled, analyzed, and optimized for maximum efficiency. Tonight was supposed to be different. A rare evening of solitude where she could think through the company's upcoming merger without interruption. But the scene at the nearby table had captured her complete attention. Victoria had built her reputation on reading people, on seeing through facades to understand true character. In her corporate world, she encountered Marcus's type regularly. Men who measured worth by material possessions, who treated others as stepping stones or obstacles rather than human beings. She had learned to navigate their world, to beat them at their own game, but she had never stopped despising their casual cruelty. From her vantage point, Victoria could see Sarah's profile clearly. The young woman's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup, but her posture remained straight. There was something remarkable about her composure, about the way she refused to crumble under humiliation. Victoria recognized strength when she saw it, the kind of quiet resilience that couldn't be bought or taught. "Excuse me," Victoria found herself saying to her own waiter, a decision forming before she fully realized it. "The young woman at table 7. I'd like to handle her bill tonight. Whatever she orders." The waiter, Roberto, had worked at Romano's for 15 years and had seen Victoria dine alone many times. She was always polite, but distant, focused on her phone or laptop, never engaging in unnecessary conversation. This request surprised him. "Of course, Ms. Sterling. Should I tell her?" Not yet. Victoria's mind was working rapidly, formulating a plan that surprised even her. "Actually, I'd like you to tell her that the house would like to offer her dinner service, compliments of the management. Tell her we noticed her. Situation. And we'd be honored to have her stay." Roberto nodded, understanding immediately. In his years of service, he had witnessed countless first dates, celebrations, and disappointments. He had also learned to recognize class when he saw it, and the young woman at table 7 had more genuine class than most of the wealthy patrons who frequented the restaurant. Victoria watched as Roberto approached Sarah's table. She observed Sarah's confusion, then surprise, as Roberto explained the offer. Sarah's initial reaction was to refuse. Victoria could see her shaking her head, probably embarrassed by the attention. But Roberto was persuasive, and eventually, Sarah nodded hesitantly. "What kind of person orders for someone without asking?" Victoria murmured to herself, then realized she was about to do exactly that. She called Roberto back. "Ask her what she'd like. Don't make assumptions about her preferences or dietary restrictions. And Roberto, make sure she knows this isn't charity. Tell her the management believes everyone deserves to be treated with respect, especially after experiencing the opposite." As Roberto returned to Sarah's table, Victoria found herself genuinely curious about this stranger's story. What did she do for work? What were her dreams? What had brought her to this blind date? And more importantly, what strength had allowed her to maintain her dignity in such an uncomfortable situation? Victoria had been raised in poverty, had worked 3 jobs while putting herself through business school, had faced countless rejections and dismissals from people who couldn't see. Past her background, she had learned to armor herself with success, to demand respect through achievement and wealth. But watching Sarah, she remembered a different kind of strength, the strength to remain kind and gracious even when others weren't. From her table, Victoria could hear fragments of Sarah's conversation with Roberto. Her voice was warm, genuinely grateful but not servile. She asked thoughtful questions about the menu, showed concern for putting Roberto to extra trouble. These small interactions revealed character in a way that impressed Victoria more than any business presentation ever had. "I'll have the pasta primavera, please," Sarah was saying. "And thank you so much for the kindness." "It's been a difficult evening," Roberto smiled warmly. "The pleasure is entirely ours, miss. And might I suggest our house bread? It's baked fresh this morning." Victoria watched this exchange with growing interest. Sarah's manners were impeccable, her gratitude genuine without being excessive. She treated Roberto with the same respect she would show anyone, regardless of his position. Something Victoria had learned was increasingly rare in her social and professional circles. As Sarah settled in to wait for her meal, Victoria made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew her. She was going to introduce herself, not as a CEO, not with any agenda beyond simple human connection, but as someone who had witnessed an injustice and wanted to acknowledge Sarah's grace under pressure. Victoria had spent years building walls around herself, creating distance to maintain authority and protect against vulnerability. But something about this evening, about Sarah's quiet strength in the face of humiliation, was calling to a part of herself she had almost forgotten existed. She stood up, smoothed her designer suit, and walked toward Sarah's table. With each step, she felt an unfamiliar nervousness, not the strategic calculation of a business negotiation, but the simple anxiety of one human being reaching out to another. Sarah looked up as a striking woman approached her table, and immediately felt self-conscious again. The woman was everything Marcus had probably expected in a date, elegantly dressed in what was clearly an expensive navy suit, her dark hair styled perfectly, her entire presence radiating confidence and success. For a moment, Sarah braced herself for another humiliating encounter. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight nervousness that surprised Sarah. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I couldn't help but witness what happened earlier. I'm Victoria, and I wanted to tell you that man's behavior was absolutely inexcusable." Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the directness and the unexpected kindness in Victoria's voice. "Oh, thank you. I'm Sarah, and honestly, it's fine. These things happen." "No," Victoria said firmly, then caught herself and softened her tone. "I'm sorry, that came out more forcefully than I intended. May I sit for a moment?" Sarah gestured to the chair across from her, still processing this unexpected interaction. "Of course, though I have to warn you, I'm apparently not very good company tonight." Victoria sat down, and Sarah noticed her hands, perfectly manicured but showing small calluses that suggested she hadn't always lived a life of luxury. "Trust me, you're in much better company now. I watched how you handled that situation, and I was honestly impressed by your composure." "Impressed?" Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "I got dumped before the date even started and left with $5 like I was a waitress he was stiffing." "I don't think there's anything impressive about that." "There's everything impressive about it," Victoria replied, her voice passionate now. "Do you know what I saw? I saw someone who maintained her dignity when faced with cruelty. Someone who treated the waiter with respect despite being upset. Someone who didn't make a scene or demand explanations she was obviously owed. That takes character." Sarah studied Victoria's face, looking for signs of pity or condescension, but found only genuine sincerity. "You sound like you speak from experience." Victoria paused, something flickering across her features. "I do, though I haven't always handled situations as gracefully as you did tonight." Roberto arrived with Sarah's pasta, and Victoria noticed how Sarah immediately thanked him again and asked about his shift, showing genuine interest in his response. It was a small gesture, but one that revealed everything Victoria needed to know about Sarah's character. "Victoria," Sarah said after Roberto left, "can I ask what you do? You have this presence about you, like you're used to people listening when you speak." Victoria hesitated. In her world, her title usually preceded her into every conversation, opening doors but also creating barriers. People responded to her as a CEO first, a person second. But looking at Sarah's open, curious expression, she made an unusual choice. "I run a company," she said simply. "What about you?" "I'm a librarian at the downtown branch." "I know. Not very exciting compared to running a company, but I love it. There's something magical about helping people find exactly what they're looking for, whether it's information or just escape." Victoria felt a warmth at Sarah's description that surprised her. That sounds wonderful, actually. When was the last time someone asked me to help them find something they were looking for, rather than demanding I provide something they wanted? Sarah smiled for the first time that evening, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. Well, what are you looking for? The question caught Victoria completely off guard. In her professional life, she was always the one asking questions, always strategizing, always in control. But Sarah's question was simple, honest, and somehow profound. I'm not sure I know anymore, Victoria admitted, surprised by her own honesty. I used to think I was looking for success, for respect, for financial security. I achieved all of that, but lately, she trailed off, realizing she was sharing more than she intended. But lately it doesn't feel like enough, Sarah suggested gently. Victoria looked at her sharply. How did you... Because you're here alone on a Tuesday night, just like I was supposed to be here on a date, Sarah said with a slight smile. And because you noticed a stranger's humiliation and cared enough to do something about it. That doesn't sound like someone who's found everything they're looking for. For the first time in years, Victoria felt truly seen by another person, not as a business leader or a success story, but as someone with the same fundamental needs for connection and understanding that everyone shared. Sarah, Victoria said impulsively, would you like to get out of here? I know a place nearby that makes incredible dessert, and I find myself not wanting this conversation to end. Sarah hesitated, glancing down at her simple dress, then at Victoria's obvious sophistication. I'm not sure I'm dressed appropriately for wherever you usually go. You're dressed perfectly, Victoria said with conviction. And besides, I'm tired of places that judge people by their clothes rather than their character. How do you feel about ice cream from a food truck? Sarah's face lit up with surprise and delight. Seriously? You want to get food truck ice cream? I haven't had food truck anything in years, Victoria admitted. But right now it sounds perfect. As they stood to leave, Victoria placed her hand briefly on Sarah's shoulder. For what it's worth, that man's loss was profound. He missed the chance to know someone genuinely remarkable. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. But for the first time that evening, they were tears of gratitude rather than humiliation. The food truck was parked under a street lamp in Washington Square Park, its cheerful yellow paint and hand-drawn menu board a stark contrast to Romano's elegant atmosphere. Victoria hadn't been in this part of the city in years, despite her office being only a few miles away. As they approached the truck, she felt an odd sense of freedom, as if she were stepping out of a role she'd been playing for so long she'd forgotten it was just a performance. 2 mint chocolate chip cones. Please, Sarah told the vendor, then turned to Victoria. Unless you prefer something else? I just assumed... Mint chocolate chip sounds perfect, Victoria replied, though she honestly couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten ice cream from anywhere that wasn't a 5-star restaurant. She pulled out her wallet, but Sarah was already handing over a $10 bill. My treat, Sarah said firmly. You've done enough kindness for one evening. Victoria started to protest, then stopped herself. In her world, business meals and social gatherings always involved complex calculations of who paid, what it signified, what obligations it created. But Sarah's gesture was simple and genuine, one person treating another to ice cream. She accepted the cone with a smile. They found a bench facing the park's fountain, the sound of water mixing with distant city traffic, and the laughter of late evening dog walkers. Victoria took a tentative lick of her ice cream and was surprised by how much she enjoyed the simple sweetness. So, Sarah said, settling beside her. A company. What kind of company? Victoria had spent so many years perfecting her elevator pitch that the words usually rolled off her tongue automatically. But sitting here with Sarah, she found herself wanting to give a different kind of answer. We develop software for businesses, everything from inventory management to customer service platforms. I started it in my apartment about 12 years ago, with nothing but student loan debt and determination. Sarah turned to look at her more closely. Wait, you built it from nothing? How old were you? 23, fresh out of business school. No connections, no family money, just a lot of ideas and absolutely no idea how difficult it would actually be. That's incredible, Sarah said. and Victoria could hear genuine admiration in her voice. "What made you think you could do something like that?" Victoria paused, realizing that no one had asked her this question in years. People usually wanted to know about market strategy, profit margins, expansion plans, but Sarah was asking about the beginning, about the person behind the business. "Honestly, stubbornness," Victoria laughed. "I grew up poor, really poor. My mom worked 3 jobs just to keep us in our apartment. I watched her struggle with systems that didn't work, with companies that treated her like she didn't matter, because she didn't have money or education. I wanted to build something different, something that would make people's lives easier instead of harder." Sarah nodded slowly. "And did you? Make it different, I mean." The question hit Victoria harder than she expected. "I thought I had, but sitting in that restaurant tonight, watching you get treated like you were disposable because you weren't wearing designer clothes, it made me realize I might have lost sight of what different was supposed to mean." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both focused on their ice cream. A young couple walked past, holding hands and laughing at something private between them, and Victoria felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said eventually. "Why did you really come over to my table tonight? I mean, I'm grateful you did, but it must have been awkward for you too." Victoria considered the question seriously. "Because I recognize something in you that I used to see in myself. When I was building the company, I got rejected constantly. Investors who wouldn't take meetings because I was too young, too female, too much from the wrong side of town. I learned to develop thick skin, to fight back, to prove them wrong through success. But," Sarah prompted gently, "but watching you tonight, seeing how you maintained your grace and dignity without hardening yourself, it reminded me of who I used to be before I built all these walls around myself." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I almost didn't go on that date tonight. I've been single for over a year, partly because dating feels so much about performance and pretending to be someone you think the other person wants. But my coworker convinced me that Marcus was genuine and down to earth." She laughed ruefully. "I'm sorry you experienced that," Victoria said. "But I'm not sorry it brought us together." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "Together?" Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I mean, brought us to this conversation. This evening. I haven't talked to someone like this in, I can't remember how long. What's it usually like? Your conversations, I mean. Strategic, calculated, always with an agenda or a goal. Even social events are really networking opportunities. I realized tonight that I haven't had a conversation in months where I wasn't trying to achieve something specific." Sarah smiled. "Well, what are you trying to achieve right now?" The question was playful, but Victoria found herself answering seriously. "Right now, I'm trying to extend this evening for as long as possible. I'm trying to understand how someone can be treated so poorly and still find reasons to be kind to strangers. And I'm trying to figure out why talking to you feels more natural than any conversation I've had in my professional life." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "Maybe because I'm not trying to get anything from you. I don't know who you are in your professional life, what connections you have, what opportunities you might represent. I just know you're someone who saw a stranger having a terrible night and decided to do something about it." Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. "Sarah, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night? A real dinner, not a business meal, not a networking event, just dinner." Sarah hesitated, and Victoria could see the internal debate playing out across her features. "I'd love to," Sarah said finally, "but I want to be clear about something. I'm not interested in being anyone's charity case or project. If you're asking because you feel sorry for me, I'm asking because I haven't enjoyed anyone's company this much in years," Victoria interrupted. "I'm asking because you've reminded me of parts of myself I thought I'd lost. And I'm asking because I'd like to know more about the woman who can find magic in helping people discover what they're looking for." 3 months later, Victoria sat in her office, but her attention wasn't on the quarterly reports spread across her desk. Instead, she was looking at a photo on her phone, Sarah laughing at something ridiculous they'd encountered during their weekend visit to the botanical garden. It had become Victoria's favorite picture, capturing a joy that seemed to illuminate everything around it. The transformation in Victoria's life had been gradual, but profound. What had started as dinner the night after their ice cream encounter had evolved into regular meetings, long conversations, and a growing friendship that had surprised them both. Sarah had introduced Victoria to a world of simple pleasures: Sunday morning farmers markets, independent bookstores, community theater performances, while Victoria had shown Sarah experiences she'd never imagined, from private gallery openings to weekend trips to her family's cabin upstate. But more than the activities they shared, it was the way Sarah saw the world that had begun to change Victoria's perspective on everything. Ms. Sterling, Victoria's assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the open office door. "The team leads are here for the quarterly review." Victoria glanced at her watch, surprised by how quickly the morning had passed. "Send them in, please." As her department heads filed into the conference room, Victoria noticed something she'd been seeing more frequently. The way her employees interacted with her had shifted. She was still respected, still clearly in charge. But there was less tension in the room, fewer guarded expressions. Over the past months, influenced by her conversations with Sarah, Victoria had begun making changes to her leadership style. "Before we dive into the numbers," Victoria began, "I want to start with something different today. I want to hear about challenges you're facing, not just operational challenges, but barriers that might be preventing your teams from doing their best work." The surprise on her team's faces was evident. Marcus Chen, her head of development, was the first to speak up. "Well, actually, we've been struggling with work-life balance in the development team. The project deadlines have been intense, and several people are showing signs of burnout." 6 months ago, Victoria would have focused immediately on productivity metrics and deadline requirements. Today, she found herself thinking about Sarah's description of the library staff meetings, where they regularly checked in on each other's well-being. "What do you think would help?" Victoria asked. The conversation that followed was unlike any quarterly review Victoria had ever conducted. Instead of focusing solely on performance metrics, they talked about sustainable work practices, professional development opportunities, and ways to recognize team members who were going above and beyond. "I'd like to implement something new," Victoria announced as the meeting was wrapping up. "Starting next month, I want each department to nominate someone who's made an exceptional contribution to team morale or helped a colleague in a significant way. We'll recognize these people at our monthly all-hands meeting." After her team left, Victoria remained in the conference room, looking out at the city skyline. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did your meeting go? Remember, you're not just a boss today, you're a leader." Victoria smiled, typing back, "Getting there. Dinner tonight? Always. I'm making that pasta you love." Victoria had spent so many evenings alone in expensive restaurants, conducting business over carefully crafted meals. Now her favorite dinners happened in Sarah's small kitchen, where they cooked together and talked about everything from books Sarah was recommending to the patrons she'd helped find exactly what they needed. 2 weeks later, Victoria stood in the children's section of Sarah's library, watching as Sarah conducted a reading hour for local families. She had volunteered to help, something that would have been unthinkable in her previous life. As she watched Sarah bring stories to life for a dozen captivated children, Victoria understood something fundamental about the woman who had changed her perspective on everything. Sarah didn't just help people find books, she helped them find possibilities. She saw potential in everyone who walked through the library doors. From the elderly man learning to use computers to connect with distant grandchildren, to the teenager researching colleges no one in her family had ever attended. After the reading hour, as they were putting away books and arranging chairs, Sarah looked at Victoria thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about something," Sarah said. "That night we met, when you asked what I was looking for, I gave you some answer about helping people find things, but I don't think I was entirely honest." Victoria stopped arranging chairs and gave Sarah her full attention. "What I was really looking for," Sarah continued, "was someone who saw me as more than the sum of my circumstances. Someone who understood that worth isn't measured by designer clothes or expensive restaurants or the right zip code." Victoria felt her heart tighten with emotion. "And did you find that?" Sarah smiled, the same transformative expression that had captivated Victoria that first night. "I found something better. I found someone who reminded me that I already had worth and who let me help her remember the same thing about herself." Victoria crossed the small space between them and took Sarah's hands. I need to tell you something. That night at Romano's, I wasn't just observing a stranger's humiliation. I was seeing my own past, and maybe my future, if I'd continued down the path I was on. What do you mean? I was becoming like Marcus, Victoria said quietly. Not intentionally, but gradually. I was measuring people by their usefulness to me, their position, their ability to advance my goals. I was losing the ability to see people as individuals with their own dreams and struggles. Sarah squeezed her hands gently. But you didn't. You saw me that night when I felt most invisible. You were never invisible, Victoria said firmly. You were the most genuine person in that restaurant. You still are the most genuine person I know. As they stood together in the quiet library, surrounded by thousands of stories of human experience and possibility, Victoria realized she had found something she hadn't even known she was missing. Not just a relationship, but a return to the person she had been before success had taught her to guard her heart. 6 months after that humiliating night at Romano's, Sarah received a call from Victoria's assistant, asking if she could come to Sterling Industries for a special presentation. Confused but curious, Sarah found herself in Victoria's sleek conference room, facing a wall-mounted screen showing architectural plans. What is this? Sarah asked. Victoria stood at the front of the room, looking simultaneously confident and nervous. It's a partnership proposal between Sterling Industries and the city library system. We want to fund technology upgrades, expanded programming, and most importantly, a new community outreach position. Sarah stared at the plans, recognizing the library branch layouts. Victoria, this is incredible, but why are you showing me? Because I want to offer you that community outreach position. You'd be designing and implementing programs that help underserved populations access technology, educational resources, career development tools, everything you're already doing, but with the resources to do it on a much larger scale. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to change lives professionally the way you changed mine personally. Victoria stepped closer. But more than that, I'm asking you to build something with me. Not just a program, but a future where businesses measure success by the positive impact they have on their communities. Sarah looked at the plans again, seeing not just organizational charts and budget projections, but possibilities for every person who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. As Victoria crossed the room and embraced her, Sarah thought about that terrible night when she'd been left alone with $5 and a wounded spirit. She had never imagined that her lowest moment would lead to discovering not just love, but purpose, partnership, and the profound satisfaction of building something meaningful together. That evening, back at Romano's for a celebration dinner, they sat at the same table where Victoria had first watched Sarah maintain her dignity in the face of humiliation. Roberto, their waiter, smiled knowingly as he brought them champagne. To new beginnings, Victoria said, raising her glass. To seeing people's true worth, Sarah replied, clinking her glass against Victoria's. And as they toasted to the future they were building together, both women understood that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the courage to remain kind when others are cruel, and to stay open to connection, even when it comes from the most unexpected places. Thank you for joining us on Sarah and Victoria's incredible journey. This story reminds us that our worth isn't determined by others' opinions, and that sometimes our most difficult moments can lead to our greatest opportunities. True character reveals itself not in comfort, but in how we treat others when we're at our lowest. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. It helps us continue bringing you stories of resilience, hope, and unexpected connections. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences of finding strength in difficult moments, or times when a stranger's kindness changed your perspective. Your stories inspire us and create a community of support for everyone who believes in the power of human dignity and second chances. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of respect, kindness, and love exactly as you are.